It started like any other first-of-the-month routine. I had the rent money neatly tucked into a plain white envelope, cash, as my landlady preferred. No transfers, no checks, no apps. She was old school like that. I had even gone to the bank earlier that morning to withdraw it, making sure every bill was crisp and counted right. I remember feeling slightly proud of myself, thinking I was ahead of the game this month. Usually, I was scrambling at the last minute or handing it over a day late with some half-baked excuse. But not this time. This time, I was going to be the model tenant. I walked up the narrow stairway to her unit, a slightly creaky old wooden set of steps that groaned under every footstep. I'd lived in the building for a little over 6 months, and by now, I knew every sound it made. The subtle hum of the heater kicking in, the whistle of the wind against the back windows, the occasional thud of a neighbor's heavy boots. It was a quiet building, filled mostly with older tenants who kept to themselves. I rarely interacted with anyone except for her. Mrs. Caldwell was a woman most people in the neighborhood knew by sight. Silver hair always perfectly pinned, bright lipstick that somehow never smudged, and that unmistakable air of someone who had seen a lot and wasn't much impressed by any of it. She wasn't exactly friendly, but she wasn't mean either. More, watchful. Observant. She had this way of looking at you that made you second-guess yourself, even when you knew you hadn't done anything wrong. Every time I spoke to her, I felt like I was being tested. That morning, as I climbed the last step and stood outside her door, I hesitated for a second. Not because I thought anything unusual would happen, nothing ever really did in this place, but because knocking on her door always felt like stepping into some weird, invisible boundary. I couldn't explain it. Just one of those gut feelings you get. I brushed it off and gave the door 3 quick knocks, just loud enough to be polite. I heard movement almost immediately. Footsteps, soft and measured, coming toward the door. The sound of a lock turning. Then a pause. And finally, the door opened. There she was, Mrs. Caldwell, dressed, oddly enough, in something I didn't expect. Not her usual pressed blouse and skirt combo, but a silk robe, loosely tied at the waist, showing just a little more skin than seemed proper for a woman her age. I caught myself blinking. She looked at me the way someone might look at a package they didn't remember ordering. "Well, good morning," she said, her voice smooth but slightly amused. "Right on time, I see." I nodded, holding up the envelope slightly. "Morning, Mrs. Caldwell. Brought the rent, as usual." She didn't reach for it. Instead, she leaned a little against the doorframe, eyes narrowing just a bit, like she was sizing me up. The way a cat watches a bird in the yard, curious, but with something else mixed in. I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the envelope. "That's very responsible of you," she said slowly. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "But tell me something. Do you always do everything, the usual way?" I wasn't sure how to answer that. Was she joking? Making conversation? I gave a half smile, a little nervous. "I try, I guess." Her lips curved, almost into a smile, but not quite. It was the kind of expression that felt like it meant something more than it said. She tilted her head slightly. I wonder if you'd be open to something a little different this month." I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard that right. The envelope in my hand suddenly felt heavier than it should have. She didn't even glance at the envelope. I stood there, holding it out in front of me like some awkward schoolkid offering a late homework assignment, waiting for her to take it. But Mrs. Caldwell made no move toward it. Instead, she leaned casually against the doorframe, folding her arms, eyes steady on mine. The faintest trace of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, not warm, not exactly kind, more like she knew something I didn't. I cleared my throat softly. Rent. Like we agreed." I gave the envelope a little shake, hoping to break whatever odd moment was hanging in the air between us. Still nothing. She just raised an eyebrow, her expression never changing. I see, she said finally, her voice calm, almost thoughtful. You're very punctual this month. I let out a small, nervous laugh, unsure why her words felt more like a statement laced with meaning than simple conversation. Trying to stay on top of things, you know. I said. Didn't want to be late again. She nodded slightly but still made no attempt to take the envelope. The hallway felt unusually quiet. I could hear the faint ticking of a clock from inside her apartment and the muffled hum of a radio somewhere in the distance. The pause between us stretched longer than it should have. I appreciate that, she said after a moment. Really, I do. I blinked. Okay, good, I thought. That's good. I took a small step forward, offering the envelope once more. But instead of reaching for it, she uncrossed her arms and placed her hand gently on the doorframe. Her fingers tapped against the wood, almost absent-mindedly. Then she gave a slow, deliberate shake of her head. That won't be necessary, she said softly. At first, I didn't quite process what she meant. I looked at the envelope, then back at her. I even laughed a little, thinking maybe I'd misunderstood. Won't be necessary. I repeated, my voice higher than I intended. She smiled again, that same subtle, unreadable smile. No, it won't. I stood there, confused. Was she joking? Was this some kind of strange test? Did I do something wrong? I had no clue how to react. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe she was giving me a break this month. Some sort of reward for finally being on time. But that didn't make sense. She wasn't the type to do charity. Is everything okay? I asked carefully, lowering the envelope a little. I mean, I don't mind paying, obviously. It's rent. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief second, I thought I caught something behind them, a flicker of something sharp, something knowing. Oh, I know you don't mind, she said softly. But sometimes, money isn't the only way to settle things. I stared at her, feeling like the floor had shifted slightly under my feet. What did that even mean? Was she suggesting, no, that couldn't be right? I pushed the thought away before it could fully form. I'm not sure I follow, I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. She tilted her head again, that faint smile still playing at her lips. There are other kinds of arrangements, she said, her tone light, almost playful. Other ways, to make things work between landlord and tenant. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck. My fingers tightened around the envelope again. I wanted her to laugh, to say she was joking, that this was some bizarre sense of humor I hadn't picked up on before. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching me, waiting. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. She didn't leave it hanging in the air for long. After that unsettling pause, Mrs. Caldwell finally stepped back slightly, opening the door a little wider. The movement wasn't exactly an invitation, but it wasn't a dismissal either. It was subtle, calculated, like she wanted to see if I'd crossed the threshold on my own. I didn't move. I just stood there, gripping the envelope like it was some sort of shield. My mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. I wasn't sure what I was even supposed to say. There was a strange tightness in my chest, a kind of tension I couldn't explain. The way she looked at me, not demanding, not impatient, just calm, certain, like she already knew how this was going to play out. Then, she spoke again, her voice low and smooth, the words rolling off her tongue in a way that almost made them sound harmless. I was thinking, perhaps you'd be interested in something different this month. The way she said it wasn't casual. It wasn't even suggestive. It was deliberate. Meant to linger in the space between us. She studied me as she spoke, her eyes sharp and searching. Like she was reading every flicker of hesitation on my face, every twitch of uncertainty. I swallowed hard. Different, how? I asked, the words feeling dry in my mouth. She smiled again, that slow, knowing kind of smile, and leaned her shoulder lightly against the doorframe. "Let's just say," she began, "I'm open to arrangements that don't involve money." I stared at her, sure I hadn't heard that right. Arrangements? What did that even mean? My mind instantly jumped to the worst conclusions. Was this some kind of scam? Was she setting me up for something? I glanced past her, into the dim hallway of her apartment, but saw nothing unusual. Just the faint glimmer of antique furniture, old framed photographs on the wall, soft yellow light spilling out from a lamp in the corner. Everything looked normal. But this situation didn't feel normal. Not at all. Arrangements? I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. She gave a soft little laugh, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Don't look so worried," she said. "It's nothing illegal. Nothing you'd have to confess to your priest." I wasn't sure if that was supposed to make me feel better or worse. "I just think, sometimes, neighbors can help each other out. You've been a good tenant, well, when you remember to pay on time. And I happen to believe in creative solutions." I tried to steady my breathing. I wanted to ask her straight out what she meant, demand she be clear, but I couldn't seem to form the words. She took a step forward then, not enough to invade my space, but enough to make her presence feel bigger, heavier somehow. "I don't bite," she said softly, her eyes locked on mine. "Unless, of course, you ask nicely." My heart thudded sharply against my ribs. She let the words hang for a beat before giving a soft, almost inaudible sigh. "Why don't you come in for a minute?" I shook my head slightly, unsure if I meant it as a no or just an instinctive reaction to the rising swirl of confusion inside me. Her hand moved lightly to the edge of the door, fingers curling around it. She didn't push it open any further, didn't reach for me. She simply waited, eyes steady, her expression calm. "You might be surprised how much simpler things can be, when you're open to a little flexibility," she said, her voice soft but unmistakably firm. I stood there, feeling the weight of her words pressing in, unsure what kind of flexibility she meant, or how far she expected me to go with it. The air between us felt heavier with every passing second. I could feel a bead of sweat forming at the base of my neck, though the hallway wasn't warm. My grip on the envelope slackened slightly as I tried to make sense of her words. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, call it a misunderstanding, some odd joke I wasn't catching. But the look in her eyes told me this was anything but a joke. She shifted her weight, crossing one leg over the other in a way that seemed casual on the surface but felt deliberate underneath. There was something almost practiced about the way she moved, like this wasn't the first time she delivered this kind of offer. I felt my mouth go dry. "What, exactly are you suggesting?" I asked, finally managing to push the words out. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. Her smile deepened, slow and careful, like she was savoring the moment. "I think you know," she said softly. I shook my head, maybe too quickly. "No. I really don't." She gave a soft, amused hum and leaned in just slightly. Her voice dropped lower, almost to a whisper, but every word hit sharp and clear. "I'm suggesting that we come to a personal arrangement. You help me with a few things. Keep me company now and then. And I forget all about that little rent envelope." I blinked, stunned. "Keep you company?" She nodded, her expression entirely composed. "It gets lonely in this building. Not many visitors. I thought, maybe you'd be open to fixing that." I stared at her, trying to process what she meant, or what she was implying. On the surface, the words sounded harmless enough. But the tone in her voice and the way her eyes stayed fixed on mine told a different story. I felt a tightness in my chest that wasn't fear exactly, but something close. I glanced down at the envelope in my hand, wondering if this piece of paper was supposed to buy me out of something I hadn't signed up for. "And, if I say no?" I asked, my voice quieter now. She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "Why would you?" I could tell she wasn't asking for a real answer. The way she said it sounded more like a challenge. I ran a hand through my hair, suddenly aware of how quiet everything around us had become. The hallway felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to respond. I thought I was paying rent, I muttered, almost to myself. She chuckled softly. And you are. In your way. Her words hung in the air, lingering longer than I wanted them to. I felt a strange mix of emotions knotting in my stomach, confusion, awkwardness, a flicker of something like curiosity I didn't want to admit to. She took another step back, the door opening a little wider. Her hand slid along the edge of the door, her fingers tapping lightly against the wood. It's entirely your choice, she said softly. I'm not forcing anything. The way she said it, with that soft assurance, somehow made it feel like there wasn't much of a choice at all. I opened my mouth to speak, though I wasn't sure what I was even going to say. The words felt stuck, tangled somewhere between my head and my throat. She waited, watching me patiently, her expression calm, expectant, like she was giving me all the time in the world. But somehow, I knew the clock had already started ticking the moment I'd knocked on her door. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads I hadn't even seen coming. One path seemed obvious: hand over the envelope, insist on paying the rent the regular way, and hope she'd just laugh it off and take the money. The other path, that was the one I couldn't quite define yet. But I knew it wasn't about money. It wasn't about leases or contracts or late fees. The way she looked at me, the way she spoke, made it painfully clear this was something else entirely. My mind raced through the possibilities, each one more uncertain than the last. Was this some strange power play? A test to see how easily I'd fold under pressure? Or was it exactly what it sounded like, a proposition wrapped in polite words and soft smiles? I shifted on my feet, still holding the envelope like it could somehow protect me from the uncomfortable reality pressing in on both sides. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, or at the very least, way outside the bounds of normal tenant-landlord dealings. But mixed with that discomfort was a curious, unwelcome flicker of intrigue. Mrs. Caldwell didn't move. She simply stood there, perfectly composed, giving me all the space I needed, or making me think I had it. Her expression remained steady, eyes watching me with a calm patience that felt both inviting and unsettling. I couldn't tell if she was daring me to refuse or expecting me to cave. A dozen thoughts shot through my head. If I said no, would she kick me out? Could she even do that? Was this her way of holding the upper hand, subtly reminding me who had control over my lease, my rent, my living situation? The idea of losing the apartment, especially over something like this, tightened my chest in a way I hadn't expected. But if I said yes, what exactly was I agreeing to? Was this really just casual company, harmless conversation, maybe some chores or errands? Or was there something more wrapped inside her careful wording, something unspoken but clearly understood? The silence stretched, her eyes locked on mine, waiting. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the choice settle on my shoulders. The logical part of me screamed to walk away, to tell her no, to hand her the envelope and leave. But logic felt like a distant echo under the hum of this strange, charged moment. I tried to imagine how this would play out if I accepted. Would it really be as simple as she made it sound? Or would I be stepping into a situation I couldn't easily step out of later? The idea of owing someone like her, not in money, but in something more personal, sent a chill up my spine. I looked at her again, really looked. She seemed completely at ease, like this was nothing unusual, like this was the most natural thing in the world. That calm, confident stare unnerved me more than any raised voice or sharp demand ever could have. It was as if she already knew which way I'd lean, like she was waiting for me to realize it myself. I opened my mouth, a half-formed answer sitting on the tip of my tongue, but the words didn't come out. Instead, I caught myself hesitating, standing there in the half-open doorway, caught in some strange limbo between a decision I wasn't sure I wanted to make and the growing sense that walking away might not even be an option anymore. The longer I stood there, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about paying the rent. This was about something else entirely. Something that would require me to either step into unfamiliar territory or walk away and deal with whatever consequences that choice might bring. Looking back on it now, it's strange how a single encounter can shift the way you see things. I walked up to that door thinking I understood how the world worked: pay your dues, follow the rules, keep your head down, and everything stays simple. But standing there, rent envelope in hand, facing Mrs. Caldwell and her quiet, unnerving proposal, I realized life doesn't always play by the rules you expect. Some people make their own rules entirely. I learned something about power that day, about the subtle ways people hold it over each other. Mrs. Caldwell hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't made any threats. She hadn't even used direct language. But in those few carefully chosen words, in the steady calm of her eyes, she'd said more than any signed agreement ever could. The offer wasn't just about skipping a rent payment. It was about her holding the upper hand, about testing how far she could push the boundary without actually stepping over a line. It wasn't lost on me that she framed it as a choice. Everything she said was wrapped in polite suggestions, a soft voice, an open-ended invitation. But underneath it all, there was an edge. An understanding that if I walked away or said the wrong thing, there would be a price. Maybe not one written into a lease, but a price all the same. That was the real game, not about money, but about control, about setting the terms without ever making them official. And then there was me, standing there, caught between instinct and fear, pride and uncertainty. I had walked into the situation thinking like a tenant, someone fulfilling an obligation. But the moment I realized this wasn't about the rent, I started seeing things from a whole different angle. I started thinking about who really held the cards, and how quickly a simple exchange could turn into a quiet kind of leverage. I kept turning it over in my head long after I left her door. What exactly was I supposed to take from that moment? That some people see every relationship as a transaction. That sometimes, the terms of a deal change without warning, and you're the last one to find out. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe I learned that you don't really know who you're dealing with, not until the rules of the game suddenly shift right in front of you. Even though nothing was said outright, her meaning was clear enough. And that's what stuck with me the most, how easy it was for a person to hint at something bigger without ever saying it, how a few words could tie you up in knots, make you question yourself, your decisions, your safety. It wasn't the kind of lesson you expect to learn when you're just trying to pay your rent on time. I realized, too, how quickly situations can spin out of your control when you hesitate, when you second-guess your instincts. That moment of pause, that hesitation I felt when I could have walked away, when I could have said no firmly, was the exact moment everything shifted. It made me wonder how many times in life people find themselves trapped in situations because they didn't react fast enough, because they let someone else take control of the moment. What I thought would be a quick, forgettable exchange turned into something that stuck with me far longer than I expected. Not because of what happened afterward, but because of what I understood in that strange, tense silence. You can do everything right, follow every rule, and still find yourself cornered by something you never saw coming. And sometimes, the people you least expect are the ones who know exactly how to put you there, with a smile, a soft word, and a door half left open.